Lex, I read your Medium article, and it touched a nerve with me, as I'm sure it did with a lot of people. You've been gathering stories about dreams for a while. You wrote did some of that in a book that came out here. Now it's sort of exploded. Do you know why?
Hey, George, pleasure to chat with you on Mystery Wire. It is interesting. At first, it seemed kind of anecdotal. People started talking about having weird pandemic dreams on the internet. And now I think it really has become kind of an international sensation. All sorts of major publications from the New York Times and the Washington Post, LA Times, USA Today, they're all doing stories on pandemic dreams. And then in just a piece in National Geographic that came out a couple of days ago, they talked about how there's studies being done in a couple places in Europe, the Lyon Neuroscience Center, that's been tracking people's dreams since March, and they've seen both an uptick in dream recall and nightmarish type dreams. And also in Italy, they've been doing some research at a national sleep center, and they found kind of an uptick in parasomnias and unusual sleep states, which was what I wrote about primarily in my book, Nightmare Land. And I did do a survey of the Coast audience starting late March, ran for about 10 days, and got some very interesting responses that kind of ran the gamut. It definitely included nightmares, some premonitions, some strange parasomnias like weird entities and sleep paralysis type of things. So it was really interesting to get kind of check in, and it actually was before it became such a big national, international story.
Kind of tough to quantify it, I would imagine, but it's a lot of the incidents that you've written about are anecdotal, but it's also pretty tough to deny that it really is happening.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things that occurred to me was with all this focus on things that we're having during this unprecedented period, it could just be that we're applying this filter, like, okay, we're going through this crazy pandemic thing. Now everything's being looked at through that kind of lens. On the other hand, I think that we are legitimately being influenced in our dreams from our daily experiences. And this is just such an earth-shaking experience for many people, particularly people on the front lines that are dealing, like working in hospitals. They seem to be more likely to have nightmares and PTSD type experiences. I did hear in my Coast survey from some people that worked in the medical field, and they seem to have more medically oriented dreams.
The why is an interesting question. What is the mechanism that is generating this? I guess we're isolated, we're afraid, but I wonder if everyone else's dreams are influencing mine. Is there some kind of connection there that has not really been fully explored? What do you think?
I wondered about that in the Medium article because this does seem so unprecedented that everyone in the world is all going through this. It really is different than some of these other major events like 9/11 that are more localized to the United States. So it does seem to me that there might be this kind of shared effect that's really something that's not happened before in my lifetime, that we're all experiencing this. And it doesn't seem to be a stretch to think that that could be reflected into our nighttime journeys.
Give me some categories of what kinds of dreams that you're hearing again and again, and then some examples of the ones that really stand out to you.
Well, one of the things that I thought was an interesting point that Professor Deidre Barrett from Harvard Medical School made was that since the virus is invisible, it really lends itself in the dream state to presenting itself in as almost anything that could be kind of a stand-in for it. So among the dreams that I got, some of them were kind of natural disasters where people were dealing with tsunamis. There was one case where a woman's car drove off a cliff and she was completely inundated by water and was wondering, like, do I roll down the windows and try to escape, or will someone come to get me? And there's dreams that involve like bug attacks and things of that nature. I did get some parasomnia type things where there was a very eerie case of a woman who she said she was kind of this hard as nails nurse that had really been around the block, but she started experiencing about 5 nights in a row, she would wake up. So this is actually, this parasomnia kind of thing, which refers to aberrant states that occur in and around sleep. And she saw this figure lying next to her in her bed, and she lives alone. So it was definitely like, whoa, what is this? And so she wasn't completely frightened in a way. But she didn't want to look the figure in the face for some reason, in case it had red eyes or something like that. So she just very trepidatiously would sort of glance at it. And she was left to wonder, was it like a guardian angel that had come to protect her? Or was it more like a grim reaper? So it's really interesting. You could surmise, well, maybe it was a kind of case of sleep paralysis where people see these entities that appear in their bedrooms, or maybe just some kind of hypnagogic hallucination that people sometimes get when they're falling in and out of sleep.
It's always tricky to try to interpret dreams. Some people say they're good at it. The rest of us, we have no idea what the heck that meant when we wake up in the morning. But I wonder if these dreams about tsunamis and disasters and plunging into the ocean and things of that sort, or demonic figures, if they are stand-ins for our anxiety over the virus.
I think that would be a good guess, yeah, because I think we all have more anxiety now, and it would certainly stand to reason that these different themes are representing what we're feeling emotionally. One of the current explanations of the purpose behind dreams is to process our emotions. And I think it's true to some extent. My feeling about these explanations behind dreams is that it's not one size fits all. Some dreams may kind of be representative of more of a Freudian thing, whereas other ones you can see like you're just trying to work something out. And so this idea that of like natural disasters, it could represent people feeling out of control, and it's like, wow, this is a situation that's beyond me, and and so the storm or the tsunami can be symbolic of those kind of fears.
What was the reaction when you put out a call to coast listeners? Hey, share with me your dreams. Was it a strong reaction? Did they jump right in it, listeners?
They did. I think people in the Coast audience are particularly attuned to dreams, and my particular interest is in this sort of more dark side and nightmares and these unusual dream states. So I think that they were fairly aligned to that. I did get a wide spectrum of responses, and I tried to choose some of the more fascinating and scary and surreal ones for the article that I did.
Any other ones you want to share that jump out?
Well, there were some that were I thought were particularly intriguing because they were sort of like eerie premonitions. There was one where a woman, actually a few months back, she was kind of reporting on the dreams that she had, and she dreamt of seeing a flock of black swans. And you probably know that term has come to represent this extreme and unexpected change. And I think she was keyed into that and almost took this as kind of like a biblical sign. And so after she had that dream, she said she went out and stocked up on all her supplies so that when the pandemic actually hit, she didn't have to go out and do the crazy run for toilet paper that other people were doing. And then another one that was kind of along the lines of a premonition was a woman from the East Coast that wrote about kind of this media landscape where she said people were disappearing from Facebook and newscasters started to seem very bleary. And then these press conferences started to stop, and then we would only hear audio. And President Trump in particular was heard only in audio, and it started to sound what she referred to as a sound-alike, that that he was somehow missing, and that they had to just put someone in his place to try to reassure people.
Any alien invasion scenario dreams?
I had my own kind of alien-esque dream that seemed to be pandemic related, where I was looking out. I have these French doors that look out into my backyard, and I saw this naked figure out there, and I kind of cracked the door a little bit, thinking like, well, maybe this is some disoriented neighbor or something. And then the figure comes like running towards the door, and I see that it's bald like me, but has no genitalia. And so I kind of like closed the door and locked it, and then it just sort of like quickly starts dismantling the lock, and so it completely removed the lock. And just before I woke up, I thought, oh, it's getting in. So it did have this kind of alien man who fell to earth quality. And later I thought, okay, the house was my body, and the alien figure was the virus. It's just a very simple interpretation.
What about celebrity guest appearances in people's dreams? Are you hearing any of those?
I have actually. When I interviewed Professor Barrett, she's also doing a survey of COVID dreams, and she got some pretty interesting and entertaining ones. There was one where a person talked about being in this kind of gymnasium where all these mattresses were spread out, and everyone was just kind of sitting there. And then the group is addressed by none other than Oprah Winfrey. And so she tells everyone, I'm going to give you all a happy ending. So I think people were all thinking like, oh, we're going to get a car, one of her lavish giveaways. But instead, she pulls out this buzzsaw, and it's like she's suddenly like Shiva the Destroyer. And the dreamer's like, oh my God, she's here to get us all. And then there was another dream that from Professor Barrett's survey about someone that apparently had been watching Tiger King, that documentary series on Netflix. And he, in his waking life, had lost his regular job. And so he was stressed out about that. And so in his dream, he dreamt that he'd gotten hired by Joe Exotic and was having to live in one of those filthy cabins and eat like the Walmart, out-of-date Walmart food. He writes in his description, like, I was never so glad to wake up.
Well, at my house, there have been some appearances in dreams by dead people who died sometimes years ago, who were not like family members. They're sort of, peripheral figures in our lives who suddenly pop up. Hadn't thought about them in years. I don't know what to make of that, but I was kind of glad to see them. And my wife too.
There's some speculation that because people are sheltering at home, that they may, because they don't have their normal social contacts, that the dream state is kind of drawing in people from the past to sort of fill in the blanks when they're not getting the same social stimulation. But as far as dead people, I got an interesting response from a fellow who said he is a paranormal researcher who actually came down with the virus. And he said, ever since I got the coronavirus, I've started having all these visitations from dead people in the dream states, and increased parasomnias and a whole host of things where you seem to indicate that the virus actually had acted like a trigger for all this paranormal stuff to happen to him.
I know that I've heard from people I know that their dreams are much more vivid than normal. Occasionally, I'm hearing that they are also lucid dreams, which is a whole different thing. Are you hearing any of that?
I have been hearing a little bit about that, and I think lucid dreams are a great way to explore different environments. So I was thinking that if the people start getting kind of bored and not being able to go to concerts and go out, if you're kind of adept at lucid dreams, you might be able to create more of your own entertainment venues. And also becoming lucid is a good way to deal with nightmares, particularly like recurring nightmares, where if you recognize that you're in a dream from within the dream, then you can kind of take your power back. I remember once I was sort of mano with this giant kangaroo, that was like about to attack me. And I somehow realized right in that moment that I was in a dream, and was able to sort of take that, and the kangaroo just became something, friendly then, by being able to defuse the fear.
I read the article from this past week about a group on Reddit, people who are engaging in astral projection during the virus. As they're locked down, they're getting out of the house, floating around. It seemed like it was violating the rules. I was jealous of it because I can't do it.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. I looked at that with great interest.
There's an article, there's a line that you used in your Medium article that talks about sleep itself as being a whiff of death. So that maybe is contributing to what people are doing when they go to sleep and dream.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the idea of when you have a death in a dream, the classic dream interpretation, even with tarot cards, it's like, well, it actually refers to change and transformation. But I think when we're being faced with these images of death every day in the media, some of this symbolism can be kind of chipped away. And what I was saying in that article about dreams and death having a connection, there's even going back to Greek mythology, where Thanatos and Hypnos, one is death and one is sleep, they're actually twins. So there's sort of this mythological connection. And just the idea that when we go to sleep, we're kind of cordoned off from all our sensory data. So in a way, it is a little bit like a mini death, at least, from being away from the external world.
As the rest of us who do not have the virus are at home and are having these vivid and sometimes lucid dreams, the people who have had the virus have said their dream patterns have changed a lot. Chris Cuomo is one of the examples, one of the highest profile examples. Are you following that?
Yes, I was really kind of fascinated by that. And what he was describing seemed to be sort of related to like fever dreams, although I think he was awake when he had this kind of waking hallucination where he saw the governor of New York at his bedside. Said it was his brother Andrew. It was his deceased father Mario. And so I think strange things happen when you're I think he was running a fever of 103. So the mental processes, I think, can be affected by that. It was one of the areas that I was really fascinated by in the research for my book, that these fever dreams have a certain similarity where there would be these kind of extremes in scale where someone might feel like they had shrunk down to the size of like a tiny pin, and then there'd be like this humongous chess piece that was inexorably moving closer and closer to them, but it just like extremely slow. And they would describe it as this sort of just unbelievable terror. And so I noticed a bunch of dreams like that where there were these really interesting issues with scale. So it's speculated that when people are running a fever, there's some sort of differences in brain processes that might affect the way we look at size and scale.
Your book, last question. Tell us about the book. I mean, Nightmare Land, you were ahead of the curve on this dream stuff when it came out. What else does it contain that pertains to this, and what are the related topics?
Well, the book really, as I was writing it, what kind of emerged to me was this idea of these mixed states of consciousness. You could almost think of them as like cocktails of consciousness, where you're combining sleep, waking, and dreaming in different ways. And so it really is exploring a lot of different things like sleep paralysis, and then sleepwalking and sleep talking, a lot of things that involve partial states of being awake and partial states of being asleep, where all sorts of interesting and bizarre things happen. There's even cases of supposed murders that people commit in their sleep. So I think in terms of this pandemic era, we are likely going to see a rise in these unusual states, because a number of them, like the parasomnias, are associated with increased anxiety. So it'll be something to watch out for. And I think we do live in an era now where if somebody has an unusual sleep experience, they can just go on the internet and go, oh, that was sleep paralysis. But, 25 years ago, people really thought, wow, I'm going crazy. I don't know what that was. And there was this kind of shameful thing. So I think that that's one of the good things about the direction of sleep science, and sleep clinics have really gone mainstream, where people can reach out and get help for the things that they're going through.
There's so many different theories about dreams over the years that scientists have grappled with, researchers, that maybe our brain is somehow shedding memories, as dreams are a way to do that. I know that I've always wondered whether it's another version of me, whether these things are really happening, but in some other part of the multiverse, that it's happening to me somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's what I was saying before, this idea that not all dreams fit the same pattern. So I think we have a lot of different types of dreams. Sometimes I wonder if we're touching into past lives or other probabilities, different versions of ourselves, and we're getting this window into that life. One of the dreams theories that kind of pertains to nightmares is this idea that dreams serve as a sort of threat simulation. So we're kind of wargaming different scenarios. And so that could be a little bit of a comfort to people that are experiencing nightmares, that, okay, this is actually to kind of tune you up to be battle ready.